Gamecock fans, now you can have your coffee and also support the Gamecocks in a championship quest to get to the top of the SEC and the top of the country by going to GamecockCoffee.com and purchasing Rise and Shine New Orleans Roast Gourmet Coffee. All of your purchases go to benefit Garnet Trust and put NIL dollars in the coffer of the Gamecocks official NIL collective. Check it out today and support the Gamecocks NIL efforts. Good morning, Gamecock fans. Welcome into coffee. Today is Thursday, April 17th, the year of our Lord 2025, and certainly fired up about talking to all of you this morning out there in Gamecock land. Hope you're doing well. Looking forward to the spring football game this weekend, 3-game baseball series. No matter how much they're struggling right now. It's got a lot going on always in the spring. It's been a little disappointing on the baseball diamond, obviously, but you do have some football to go watch at Williams-Brice Stadium tomorrow night. Hate that it's not on TV because I'm going to miss it. I was planning on going. Had the trip all planned out. Was supposed to leave yesterday. You may not have had a coffee today had I made that journey, but some things came up with the wife and I. Just did not make it feasible to go down. Life happens. I don't think I'll miss the next one. I'll tell you that. And part of the reason that I'm missing this one, so I don't miss the next ones. So sometimes you kind of sacrifice the current for the future, but this does stink because I'm going to have to rely on things other than my own eyes to kind of communicate with you about the spring game, and that's fine. I'm a smart guy. I can handle it, but certainly would help if I could roll the tape and kind of look at it. But look, spring football, guys and gals out there, man, oh man, last year, all that keeps sticking out to me is Jontavius Braswell and Tyshawn Russell. I was like, I think those guys are going to play. Yeah, they played really well in the spring game. Braswell looked like he took a step forward as a back. Russell was sure-handed after having some drops as a senior or freshman. And lo and behold, those guys never played a down. Redshirted and left. So there you go. You just never know who's going to be doing the playing once the season gets there. Elijah Davis a couple years ago, stand out in the spring game, thought, man, this guy's going to probably be pretty good. And of course he wasn't. But at the same time, a couple of years ago when this is when Rattler came in, Marshawn Lloyd looked pretty healthy. And I guess it was the second Rattler heading into 2022 when Marshawn really had the good year. He looked good, and he was like, well, look at how he's cutting and running with confidence. And he ended up having a good season, win healthy, and then, of course, got out of Dodge. And the transfer portal went to Southern Cal. That was kind of back when Carolina was losing players. They haven't lost, anybody this offseason, and that's an important part of this battle, as we all know, when you're talking about the transfer portal. Speaking of, yesterday in basketball, it's like a double bad whammy. He just got clubbed in the face with a baseball bat twice. Colin Murray Boyles goes to the NBA draft. I'm not surprised by that, and I've said that. I thought, well, there's some confidence internally he's going to come back, and the reasons all made sense. But when you're projected to be a lottery pick, you really have to go because you may not be a lottery pick the next year. All the reasons people were talking about him possibly coming back. Well, if you get drafted late now with the NBA, you may be in the G League, you may be playing in Turkey. The money is comparable to what you're doing with NIL, blah, 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 blah. And that's true. But it's also true that if you're going to be drafted now, you don't know what that draft class next year is going to look like. You can kind of guess, oh, well, this guy's good and this guy's good and he'll be up there or whatever. But what if the shots aren't falling and you kind of, next season, if he came back, you allegedly would have more scoring options. Maybe your stats aren't as good. and these general managers are splitting hairs sometimes. They may love you now, but next year they may love somebody better. So strike while the iron is hot with that. And I get that. I get that. I mean, look, I think everybody knew if the feedback came back well enough, and it was, there was some talk that maybe what the NBA actually was saying behind the scenes wasn't, you know, didn't align with the draft Knicks who were projecting him high, the handful. But obviously that was high enough, and that was fine. But then Trace and Eaglestaff, who there's no way to spin it. That was one of the keys to the season next year. They got a guy like that, high level player. What can he do? He can score. What does Carolina struggle to do sometimes? Score. Last season, a lot of bricks, a lot of bad shots. You watched it, But this is a guy that can drill it from three, and that when he heats up, I don't really care who you're playing against, but it does matter. I mean, in a lot of ways, because they're the ones guarding you. But he scored 40 against Bama, 51 in another game. Had some games where he scored 6, but was on a team that did not win a whole lot. I believe North Dakota lost 20 games last year. But just a really good player. And when Carolina got him, it was outstanding. You thought, because it was right there at the beginning, you thought, wow, this guy, get guys like this, you're cooking. But man, not only do you lose Colin Murray Boyles, but Eaglestaff at 9:18 yesterday morning cancels his contract. NIL deal with South Carolina. And you can do that nowadays because they did away with the national letter of intent, which never really applied to transfers ever. It's just you enrolled. There was really nothing ever keeping transfers, I guess, bound when they signed. But yeah, cancel the whole thing. Looks like maybe Kentucky or West Virginia will end up getting him. Just talking to some people yesterday, South Carolina's financial deal for him was amazing. I don't think they've ever paid a basketball player that much. In fact, I know they haven't. We're not too far into the NIL era, right? But that was a sweet deal along the lines of some of the other deals you've seen floated out there. So whatever money he's getting somewhere else, I don't anticipate it being that much bigger. I believe this was a basketball decision. I think also, talking to Mike Morgan yesterday on the show, Kentucky missed on a guy that went elsewhere that they were thinking they were getting, and then they kind of circled back, and that stinks. It stinks to it's good sometimes that if you got guys, program like Kentucky is interested in, because I think Mark Pope is really good at evaluating players in basketball. Cal just, when he was there now at Arkansas, he just kind of takes dudes. Nice blend at Arkansas now. Nick Pringle's kind of a bench guy for them probably, but Nick Pringle ends up at Arkansas. But it's different. But I like the way he finds players. Obviously, they didn't have guys last year. Everybody left when Calipari left, and he put together a pretty daggone good basketball team through the portal with players that maybe weren't, people didn't ooh and ah over them, right? Not McDonald's All-Americans. But, so that's good. Trent Noah, who Carolina lost last year, was from Kentucky. When they circled back on him and he goes there, he ends up playing minutes and looking pretty good. Boy, this team could have used him. And certainly if Eaglestaff ends up at UK, then that stinks. You got to play those guys. As far as West Virginia goes, I know they got a new coach. I know that West Virginia sneakily has resources that they'll pump in. They'll overpay sometimes. I don't know what that means with regards to Eaglestaff overpaying. I think overpaying is more of a football thing. Basketball, you just pay. But it was not a situation where he came back and asked for more money, and South Carolina said, no, we can't do that. All right. It was a situation where I think I'm just going to go elsewhere. And coming on the heels of the Colin Murray Bulls decision, I believe that he kind of believed that there's a strong chance he's coming back. Wouldn't it be great to play with this guy? I mean, he lost 20 games last year at his home state school. Probably doesn't want to go through that again. I was told needed a guy to kick it back out to him. I don't. That gets into the weeds in basketball with me a little too much because I don't want to say something that sounds stupid. But it was just an unfortunate situation. Carolina does have plenty of resources to go get guys, but your portal pool is going to lock in the next 5 days. I saw somebody say they got 5 days to put this together. They don't. It's 5 more days that the portal's open that players can jump in. You have all the time to sign them after that to kind of go through it. So, in other words, if you're at one of these, there's these stores, I don't want to call them secondhand stores, but maybe they're not in South Carolina. I don't think I've ever seen one in South Carolina, but it's called Going Gone, and I guess they get surplus, and it could be anything, if you still had Blu-rays, DVDs, sometimes clothes, socks, batteries, whatever. And they're only open certain days, and then they have like the dollar section, the $5 section, the $10 section, the $40 section, and they restock it at different times. But then they stop. This is it. So in other words, envision this with the portal. Okay, for the next 5 days, they're still bringing in batteries, and they're still bringing in socks, and they're still doing this. But at that point, it stops. But that doesn't mean the doors close. That doesn't mean the door's locked. That doesn't mean you can't go shop. So there is a sense of urgency, obviously, but it's not like, oh my God, we're going to have to quit signing players at the end. And that's a common mistake. I thought that for a little bit. I was like, well, they got to, and then I go, well, wait a minute. And it's just the whole purpose of the transfer portal is outbound, and the whole purpose for it really, if somebody wants to transfer, as we found out this past year football, because the kid from Wisconsin that went to Miami just left and went to Miami. He's from Miami. He's right down the road. He just went home and went to Coral Gables. Wisconsin, I think, dumbly threatened to sue him and stuff like that. I think the way Tennessee handled it is much better than the way Wisconsin handled it. But as far as players leaving, you just got to tell them to go. Sorry. Okay, fine. We'll move on without you. And at some point, it's like, if they keep asking for more, okay, we'll move on without you. Wisconsin, I don't know what they thought they were going to do by making an example out of a kid from South Florida that's up there in the frozen tundra, that wants to go home. I don't know what you're supposed to do about that as far as morally obligating him to stay. But as we found out with that situation, the NCAA said there's no rule that states you can't withdraw from one school and enroll at another and be eligible. The transfer portal governs the coaches from contacting players, right? Which we, again, all know that the representatives and the collectives can talk at any time. So, I think that as we continue to pile fake things on top of college sports, that it's sort of fake. It's sort of just like it sort of just governs coaching contacts, just like dead periods and things like that. There's no difference. But hey, do I want the portal to go away and there be just a free for all the time, 24 hours? No, I don't. It'd give you something to talk about and write about, good and bad, all the time. But no, thank you. I like the window and all that good stuff. But there's nothing that keeps Lamont Paris from signing more players after April 25th, which is when I think it closes. I'm sorry, that's the football window. Football's at 16th through the 20th. I think this is like the 22nd. So 5 days, 21st, whatever. Because it kind of got cut in half when we all thought the House settlement was going to be settled by April 7th. Obviously, it wasn't. And so it's still a free for all, whatever. So, anyway, that's the story there. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's going to be okay. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Gamecocks will be better off without Trace and Eaglestaff. I don't know where you go find another Trace and Eaglestaff. Maybe you do. But certainly a disappointment there in what I think is a critical year for the basketball program under Lamont Paris, because you don't want to get to the point where it's just like one good year. You know, there's been coaches here that have done that before, and the basketball program on the men's side, I've always said the key is everybody's won at least at some point, besides Steve Newton, since Frank McGuire left. Everybody's had a one year where it looks promising, people get excited. It's the rest of it. It's the consistency. It's sustaining it. It's not going to the NCAA tournament and having the exact same team basically the next 2 years and going and winning the NIT and acting like it's a great accomplishment, because obviously you've slipped. It's not winning 21 games your first year like Darren Horn did, and then having Devin Downey back and going 15-16. It's not going to a Final Four like Frank Martin did, and then never going back to the tournament again. It's not winning the SEC, going back to the tournament, a couple of one and dones, and then falling to 8-21 like Eddie Vogler did. It's just that's not the way this basketball program is ever going to get out of the doldrums. And so you need players to do that. And if you had players like Trace and Eaglestaff and Colin Murray Boyles back next year, your chances of doing that are pretty good. The SEC, people talk about it's going to be stronger than ever. No, it's not. Last year was a historical year. You had a lot of guys also that were older with the COVID year. Now you have JUCOs and guys like Nick Pringle, but it was the perfect storm, especially Texas and Oklahoma coming in. It's a perfect storm. Everybody was good. Everybody was up. Everybody was old. You got in and out, reshuffling of rosters like happens. It's not a given that everything's going to, Florida go 36-4 next year and win another national championship? I would probably bet on no. I wouldn't necessarily give you a hard no, because the way they kind of do money ball and things down there, it's, if they're playing their cards right, so to speak. But the SEC is not going to send 14 teams to the tournament next year. They may send 11, which is still a big number. But when you have conferences with 16, 17, 18 teams, those double-digit numbers are not going to be crazy moving forward. Now, 14 out of 16 is crazy because of the percentages, right? That is crazy. So, I don't want to say next year is going to be mission impossible for basketball. And honestly, a lot of the time when there's not expectations for men's basketball, they end up being pretty good, right? So I don't know. It's just one of those things that's very, very disappointing. And I just I understand. I feel your pain. I understand your concern. But the money's there, folks. This is the money thing. I mean, give credit to the administration, Jeremiah Donati. They've armed them to the teeth. A lot of people kind of lashed out at that yesterday after the Eaglestaff news, and it was told to me very plainly, and I would know, and you can trust me on this, that on par with everybody else in the SEC right now. And that's not on last year's number either. That's the moving forward spending number. And like I said, the Eaglestaff contract was wow. That's, people that want to talk about spending money all the time, and that's big boy ball. There you go. And I think right now in basketball, you just have to. You probably almost have to do it. There's not. It's not like football where you have all these different positions and you have a guy at one position, like wide receiver. So many wide receivers. I mean, there's more good receivers in the portal now that I would not overpay for. But if one fit, he's good enough than there was in the first one. When we're talking about some guys that were injured all the time, some guys that hadn't caught more than 4 passes a game, some guys whose production had dipped tremendously, uh, and all that's fine. Those are probably all good players in the right situation, and all of them would have been pretty good at Carolina too. But you want $1 million? No. And football, that can screw up the most important thing, which is your culture. If you have enough talent there to say, the guys we have are pretty good. And basketball, it's like, all right, so who's going to play here and who's going to score and who can shoot and all that good stuff. I do think you can overpay for a team in basketball. Gonzaga this past year paid $11 million, and they normally get to the Sweet 16, Elite Eight, and get bounced out. But not this year. They were an 8 seed, had a top 10 net, but were an 8 seed. So that's the most money I've ever heard of any school paying for a basketball team. And of course, they only have basketball, so they can. And it's obvious, they're players in the portal. But man, oh man, that didn't deliver the results they wanted. Did it deliver results at Arkansas? Nice job beating St. John's when they were cold, but you have all these great players. I mean, Sweet 16, lost to Texas Tech. I don't know. You tell me. So we'll see what happens. But football, basketball are different, and there's no issue there with NIL. And if you want to keep talking about NIL, let's just say the baseball team's not struggling, didn't struggle in that department this offseason either. So I don't know what that deal is. Gosh, ask somebody. Anyway, so there's that. So spring game coming up in football. And this is about reason number 1,000 that I wish they would. It's almost feels like it's time to start scrimmaging other teams, just because of all the conversation about spring games and the 8 schools that rebelled and said they weren't going to have one. Because nobody's going to get my portal guys. I think Nebraska actually had somebody enter the other day. So I don't know. I don't know if he was good or not. But nevertheless, it's hard sometimes to tell. What if the O-line gets a nice push? Everybody's going to be worried about the D tackles. If the D tackles have a good game, they're going to be worried about the O-line. The teams they're doing a draft, so you're not really looking at your starters. I would encourage everyone to focus on individuals if you can. It's hard to do that because it's a game and you're watching the ball. Hard for me to do that, but use some perspective when it comes to that. But there has been spring practice and progress. And so that's what I want to talk about today on offense. The offense obviously returns Lenore Sellers. Let me be clear on this too. An important factor I think that we don't talk about enough is that Lenore Sellers does have some work to do to get better. As good as he was last year at times, most of the time down the stretch, the more he played, the better he was. There's some things in the passing game. There's some things in the run game. There's the sweet spot he needs to find. Like he didn't really find it against Illinois, run versus pass, when to run, when not to. And that's all up to him. You can coach him all you want, but it's not like you're sitting there pushing a button saying run here, don't run there. It's all film review. Mike Shula is sort of working that out, right? So we'll see what happens. But I do think the offense has taken a step forward. And what I'll do today, we'll talk about that. And I'll tell you the position I think has made the most progress this spring. And I'll do it with the defense tomorrow, unless there's major breaking news. And I'll still mention it. But so we're going to kind of do this in parts. Because tomorrow will be game day, Friday, spring game. right? So just going through the positions at quarterback, you have Lenore Sellers. Cutter Woods has had an outstanding spring for a true freshman. I think he's really going to be good. I don't really care what he was rated. Keep in mind, Lenore Sellers was an in-state player who was rated the same, and I look back and Dowell Loggins does a pretty good job evaluating quarterbacks. But I also look back and see that Dave Clawson at Wake Forest did a pretty good job of evaluating quarterbacks because he would go and get guys, and then all of a sudden they pop up and they'd be really good. One of them, Sam Hartman, was at Wake and then went to Notre Dame and won some games up there for them as a 1 year rental. Then, of course, they went back to Tobacco Road and got Duke's quarterback and went the championship game with Riley Leonard this past year. But, you look at it like that, and it's, Clawson does a good job of spotting. So he spotted him, and they had him committed, and then he flips to South Carolina. So I'm not surprised. He was very well coached. He's a high floor guy. In other words, he's going to come in because of the coaching he received in high school a lot more prepared. Aaron Olin has looked really good as far as being able to throw the ball. I see why he was a 5-star prospect by some, because he's got tools, especially the arm talent, highly competitive individual. Uh, Looking forward to getting the feedback on how he plays. That's one I wish I was there. I'd like to see him throw it, see how he connects. Dante Reno's taken a step forward. So quarterback's improved. I wouldn't say it's a position that's made the most progress, but it has made progress. Running back, really good to hear that Matthew Fuller had a good scrimmage. The second one, because the first one, what I was told was when you look at the backs, he's kind of behind the other three. And so, you look at it kind of like that, and you sort of say, well, he's good. Maybe he's going to take a little more time. Well, between scrimmage 1 and scrimmage 2, he made a jump. Running back, that happens. I mean, maybe he had an off day. Maybe he didn't get blocked the first time. Maybe he just didn't get enough carries based on practice. But that was good to hear about Fuller. And then of course there's the Rasul Faison situation. Fingers crossed he gets approved. I don't know why it's taken so long, but Hale pointed out on the website that there's a case that's almost identical to his where Rutgers, the attorney general in New Jersey, so they're suing the NCAA over it. So I don't know. Maybe it gets dicey. I'm a little surprised we haven't heard something positive about that because it didn't seem like it was going to be a big deal. But he's been practicing and he's been pretty good. He's going to probably be a guy that to watch, keep an eye on in the spring game. Jawarn Howell, Oscar Attaway have had good springs. So that position's done well. I don't know that we expected collectively that spot to struggle. It's not a situation like it was 2 years ago where you're really worried about it. There are players in that room. If the unthinkable happens and Faison just absolutely, they're not going to rule him eligible or whatever, then, they're probably going to need to go find for numbers purposes, find another running back. You do have Bradley Dunn still there, who's a good player. Can he be your fourth guy? I don't know. But you really want 5. You got 4 now, plus Dunn. And then Larry Scott's another, I think his name's Larry Scott. I think it's last name Scott. Another walk-on in the room that can play a little bit. So we'll see what happens with that. But fingers crossed, there's no issue with Faison. Offensive line, Case and Henry has been not scrimmaging. That means a lot of work for Jatavius Shiver. Shane Beamer mentioned the other day that the guys that have taken advantage of injuries, Nick Sharp has been down. It looks like Lonnie Teasley's doing a lot of cross training and mixing and matching. That's good. They didn't do that last year. A lot of people, there's a lot of mixed opinions about that, especially when the line's struggling. But they didn't cross train anybody last year and they struggled. And I thought to a certain extent, with regards to the interior, you had Trevon Ball at right guard behind Torricelli Simpkins. I don't know that he was beating out Simpkins. Do I think he could have beat out Kamar Bell at left if he could play left? Yeah. I do. So and then the worry is coming into this year, if you're pondering the what ifs and the unthinkable and all that, is if Josiah Thompson goes down or has to miss a game like he did last year, if you're not cross training and all Tree Babalade is an inside guy, and you can't move him or you don't want to move him to left tackle. I mean, who's your backup left tackle? So I think they're doing the right thing this season, mixing and matching. Boaz Stanley at center looks good. I'm not going to say that this position made the most progress either until we see it, just because this position on paper looks really good. I think they're bigger, more athletic. I mean, they're if it ends up being Josiah Tree, this is left to right, Boaz, Trovon, and then Kaysen. That's like 6'7", 300, 6'6", 338, 6'5", 325, 6'4", 330. And then Ken Henry, I think 6'5", 6'6", 310. That's a big offensive line. And, with two returning tackles. No excuses for that group this year. Tight ends, I think, have been good this spring based on what I've heard. Jordan Dingle is going to be probably a sneaky good pickup. Michael Smith finally back to stretching off his injury, so he's on track to be good and be back. Hopefully takes a step. Brady Hunt's healthy, looking good. So that room, again, is going to be pretty significant as far as the offense goes. But the position I think that's made the most progress, and it's weird to say, is the receivers. You brought in an infusion of talent. Donovan Murph's not even there yet. But all of the freshmen at different points have stepped up and done good things. That's everybody from Pup Sellers to Brian Rowe to Malik Clark, who had a good scrimmage the other day. You keep going through it. And, Lex Cyrus set the record for the high jump. My goodness. And then Jordan Gitteron, young guy, should still be in his junior year, going to junior prom. My stepson's age, he's in college and he gets better every single day. And this guy is a bigger, taller, leaner, fast player. I don't know if he'll be ready. Some say maybe 2 years away, but he's made enough progress to where you say, hey, there's a chance, just a chance. I don't know, just one chance, right? And then Donovan Murph, who's physically ready to come in and play, is coming in this summer. But it's also the returning guys. I think some people are, there's a lot of focus on Nick Harbor, which there always will be, and there's no doubt he's gotten better. And that's good. Take a step forward. I've always set expectations for him production-wise in a realistic manner. Last year he didn't quite get to 30 catches like I'd hoped, but 26 was good, and he led the receiver room, not the team, the receiver room in receiving yards and got pretty consistent. But the idea is to take him from good possession receiver, reliable possession receiver, which is what he is now, to playmaker. That's the jump. That's the key. The yak that we talked about the other day. Jared Brown, mentioned him, but God, that guy, high hopes for him last year. Did not really have the season he hoped production wise. Injuries played a factor, and consistency, learning his role at South Carolina, all that did. But man, oh man, he's got that explosiveness. He's got the playmaking ability. He's got the ability to be really good. So if he can make a jump, there's good. Mazio Bennett's definitely made a jump. Your normal freshman to sophomore. Oh wow, now I run the routes well, and now I know where I'm doing and what I'm doing. And then Vidrevius Jacobs surprised me a little bit. He's competing and doing well. He's another one that had some promising moments early, looked good in practice, and then in the games kind of fell off, got hurt, another hurt guy. But he need to get stronger and really get into the playbook, and he's done that. So I would say of all the positions on offense, the one where there's more questions answered, because Honestly, folks, there's questions everywhere except starting quarterback this season. There's not a spot on either side of the ball where there are just like two returning starters and away we go. Even at corner, you're replacing O'Donnell Fortune. You feel really good about the corners, right? But corner O'Donnell Fortune, I mean, Carolina's replacing just about at every spot a key player off of last year's team. So, but I think the most answers have come with this receiving core. And if you do think about the wide receivers, yeah, you lost Gage Larvanan and Delvon Campbell, but it was such a kind of a carousel of different starters and different players last year that, you really didn't say, oh, we lost this, really good receiver out of the room and, who's going to replace him? It's more about replacing Josh Simon, that tight end, and his production. And you can do that at tight end or receiver. So I guess that makes sense that this group with the returnees and with the newcomers has answered the most questions. Now, that's a spot too in the spring game. Running routes is running routes, catching the ball is catching the ball. It's a lot easier to sit there and say the receivers had a good game or the DBs had a good game, based on what happens in the spring game. Especially now if you're going against a 5'6" walk-on DB or something, and you make a bunch of good catches, that's different. But so that's a spot if you're going to watch the spring game. You can really look for, and there's a bunch of newcomers and then a bunch of guys coming back with a lot to prove. So to me, the receiver spot is the one spot on offense I can say has probably answered the most questions this spring based on what I've been told, based on a lot of different things, data points, information, all that good stuff. So hopefully the receivers take a step forward. Again, we talked about yards after catch last week, and that's going to be very important for all of them, everybody that catches passes in this offense. All right, going to get on out of here. The morning show later today with JB. I think Brad Crawford's in today, and then Phil and I will be back with the show to follow, and then tomorrow's programming and all that. All right, this has been JC Shurburtt's Coffee. JC's out. Holla at you soon.